Hello and welcome to the Money Compass. In each of our Money Journey episodes, Julie brings to you a special guest to share their treasured memories along with the highs and lows of their very own unique and emotional money journey. And now we have the second of our trio for our anniversary special Money Journey, and we have Julie with us this time. So Julie's our host from the podcast, and we're going to be asking Julie her money story today.
This is actually quite a daunting experience, Emma. So I'm prepared. I've bullet points and everything, so I don't miss anything important out of my life.
Crikey, you are organised.
Well, I'm a lot older than you guys, so there's been a lot more years go past.
This is very true. Cast your mind back all those years, Julie. What's your earliest money memory?
Obviously, we are casting them back a long, long time. Okay, so
Once upon a time, in a land far away.
So once upon a time, there was a little girl. So I think that my earliest money memory is when I was growing up. Dad used to get paid cash, and my mum and in my parents' bedroom there was a drawer with a black tin in it with red sort of or gold sort of round. I think it was red. I can never remember now. And in it was like envelopes, and every envelope had a different label on it. So there was electricity, there was holidays, there was Christmas, there was coal, because back in those days we used to have a coal bunker in the back garden. So, and each of the envelopes had a different amount on it. And when Dad got paid, Mum would put into each envelope a different amount of money. So from memory, I'm pretty sure like electricity was like £3 a week, and she would put that money away. And then when the bills come in, she would pull out the envelope and get the money in. So I do remember the tin in the bedroom and my mum actually putting that money away. I also remember from very early on is, so we used to have pocket money, and we used to get I remember when I was about 5 getting like 50 pence. And then when I was 6, I got 60 pence. So it was like a pay rise per year.
For getting older.
So just for getting older. And I can't remember how many years that went on to, but probably up to about 10 was like getting £1. But yeah, every year it would go up. And the other thing that I remember, of course, there's loads of things you see, was when you used to lose a tooth. So, and we used to have it, and I'm sure now the figures for this are much, much higher. And I know you've got a little one in your life, so you're probably about to tell me what the amount is now. But it used to be 10p for a little tooth and 20p for a big tooth.
It was even higher than that when I was little, Julie. I remember getting a £5 for a tooth.
£5? Oh my God, inflation. That's just horrific. I can't believe it.
Wow. So there's quite a few things you remember from when you were younger.
There is quite a few things. I would say probably 5 plus. I do remember my first day at school, and apparently I wore a yellow rain mac, but other than that, I wanted to be a maths teacher, but that's not quite money related, so we digress there slightly.
Fair enough. So staying on the money journey, tell us in your own words what your journey is.
Okay, so really, I'm looking back in time. When I was born, obviously I remember nothing about this, but the first 6 months of my life I lived in a council house, and before my parents then bought their first house. Now, this is a story that I didn't obviously know at 6 months old, but it's something that I knew later on, which I think is actually really, really important. And it goes a lot towards what my money mindset is today. Back then, to get a mortgage, you used to have to pay, just have to have 3 months worth of wage slips. And my dad did a sugar beet campaign. So this is basically going to a sugar beet factory, and he worked in a factory doing whatever they do in a sugar beet factory. I've got a friend whose husband works there, so I'm sure we could find out if we really needed to. But the campaign would last about 3 months. So Dad would get 3 months worth of wage slips, and they used those to get a mortgage to buy the house. So Dad got laid off immediately after he did his 3 months. My parents bought a house, and this was back at the latter end of 1978. So now you all know how old I am. And at that point, the mortgage rates were then basically increasing up to just over 10%, and obviously went up after that into the 80s. So essentially, my parents found themselves in quite a risky situation. They'd got no job. I mean, don't get me wrong, my dad went and got a job kind of pretty much straight away, but there was still that risk element to that. And with a mortgage and a child, a small child. And then my brother came along sort of for 2 years after I was born. So there was 2 small children and this massive mortgage. So, which now, if you look at the mortgages today, it's a tiny mortgage, but back then, taking into account everything else, it was a big mortgage. So my mum was a stay-at-home mum, and she looked after me and my brother, and she used to pack fireworks in the evening for extra money. So I never knew we were really kind of, not exactly poor, but we didn't have everything when I was growing up. But I never knew that as a child. I felt that my childhood was rich in other areas. And I think that was really important. I remember having lots of holidays as a child, going to like Great Yarmouth, spending time in a caravan. I remember travelling all over the UK for different holidays. So I was very well travelled within England and Wales at a very, very young age. And I never really realised that we didn't have that much money. And apparently when I was growing up, we had a carpet which didn't quite fit the living room because someone had given it to us. And again, that didn't seem completely unusual to me at all.
Yeah.
So that was kind of like my childhood. Then obviously, as I got a little bit older, I got my first job as a reserve paper girl when I was 14 years old. So this is like the best job ever. In fact, I can't, for all my years of working, this has got to be the job that really, well, this just takes the icing, really. It's completely awesome.
If you could get the job back, would you go back and do it now?
Probably not at £4 a week, but back then it was great. So basically, as reserve paper girl, it meant that I only got called in if somebody was on holiday or off sick. And every week they paid me £4 a week, irrelevant of whether I had to go in or not. How cool is that for a job?
Very good.
Unfortunately, somebody then left. And what the idea was with the reserve paper girl or boy, you then took the next space. So then I ended up my own paper round, which I did till I was about 17. So that was really good. I also had at the time an afternoon paper round when I was about 15. And I absolutely, completely illogically hated this job with a complete and utter passion. If I could have just not do it, I'd walk down the hill with my paper bag, just thinking how much I absolutely detested doing it and how I hated it. And obviously, if you're a bit woo, obviously these messages all ended up back at the paper place because they actually cancelled the newspaper and I lost my paper round job. I was over the moon. I couldn't have been happier. Imagine a 15-year-old who just lost her job, but was absolutely over the moon because I just disliked it so much. So, but even before I did the paper round, I always worked at a young age because like my mum was a stay-at-home mum. She would actually go out and do land work in the fields. Living in Norfolk, we grew up in an area with lots of like fruit picking and things like that. So even as a child, apparently I'd go and sit at the end of the row in my basket or whatever you used to have back then, while mum picked strawberries. As I got older, I would go strawberry picking. Now, I always remember when I was 15 years old, having like, I think this is like as we were leaving school, so 16 years old. And you know, those last few weeks, I was 15, it was before my GCSEs. You know, you have those, that kind of couple of weeks at the end of school term when nothing really happened. And mum was like,
play games and do nothing.
Oh,
really.
yeah, it was learn to play bridge, I think was one of the things. So anyway, I remember mum saying, well, what do you want to do? And I said, I'll just rather go and pick strawberries instead. So off I trotted and picked strawberries for 2 weeks, came back into school like on the last day of term before the summer holidays broke up, completely suntanned, brown as a berry, obviously quite rich from my whole kind of couple of weeks picking strawberries off a field. And mum had written me a letter to take to the teacher, but she'd basically written Julie was absent because she was picking strawberries. So I was promptly sent off to the year head and I was asked to tell my mum not to be so honest in future. So, but I do remember that was quite amusing because I just don't think they knew what to do with me. It's like, hi, I'm back. I've been strawberry picking. Please don't promote this anywhere because we'll have no children in school. So, and that was quite interesting. So when I left school at 16, I did some land work and I also ended up working in a cannon factory. And working in the cannon factory is when I got my first actual real wage slip. It's like I had like my name on it and had an amount and I earned £110 for my first week's work.
Wow.
And I went shopping with my £110 and I bought myself a pair of black jeans from Principles and I bought myself a Wallace jacket. And I have to say the Wallace jacket probably survived till about mid-30s.
Wow.
So it then got to the point where another dry clean was probably going to kill it completely. It wasn't going to work anymore. So, but I think even then when I was earning money, I was quite frugal and quite a saver. I used to like music. So, and obviously, as you know, I'm really, really anal. So I used to buy all the number one singles, even the really bad ones, like Mr. Blobby and things like that, because that was around that time too. But I used to buy, I was very, very logical in my purchases. And I also used to save. Where I grew up in a village, which was basically in the middle of nowhere. And for most of us in the village, getting to 17, the most important thing for us was to learn to drive. And that was like really, really important. So I used to save my paper round money and other money as well to pay for driving lessons. And on my 17th birthday, I had my first driving lesson. And that was really, really great. I was at sixth form, which I then decided wasn't really for me, and I decided to go and get a job. So I applied for various jobs, and I had a job interview at a place at Barnum Broom Hotel, which for those of you who aren't living in Norfolk, is again in the middle of nowhere. So I was actually going to be going from a village in the middle of a field to a hotel in the middle of a field. So no public transport. And I actually lied at my job interview and told them I had a car, and I didn't have a car. I had passed my driving test, so that was okay, but I didn't have a car. And my parents gave me £500 towards a car and my car insurance. And Dad and I ended up in like this little, well, somewhere in the middle of nowhere in pitch black with like a security light on, looking at this car, which we bought and picked up. And the car actually was older than me, and I paid £320 for it. Wow. My insurance cost more than the car did. So that was good. And this job that I started, it was as an apprentice. So I was actually earning £35 a week. So I think I earned more actually basically working in a canning factory. But back then I knew that I didn't want to be in a canning factory for the rest of my life. And I'd got family members who'd worked in the canning factory. My dad had actually been foreman at the canning factory. So I always remember when I did the canning factory job that I was like really excited. And 2 hours into the job, I was like, oh, is this it? Am I going to pick potatoes off a line for the rest of my life? And I knew that, and I think I'm one of those people who always makes the best of everything. So I had a great 5 weeks. It was awesome fun. I had a laugh, had a joke, great time. But I knew that wasn't what my career was going to be. So I started my job at Barnum Broom, and it was in an office. So it wasn't actually at the hotel, but it was a company that had offices at the hotel. And I think this for me is a really defining moment in my life, because I suddenly were meeting people who led a different lifestyle to me. So up until now, I had quite a working class background. Don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with that at all. And, I still class myself as working class. But I started mixing with people like who had like a different lifestyle. The consultants there were earning £70,000 a year. There were some big cars in the car park. I'd got consultants with 2 mobile phones. I was easily impressed back then. What can I say? But I think at this moment, I realised that there was a different life out there for me. I didn't have to marry a pig farm labourer and have 2.4 children and stay in the village. I could have a different life. And I think that was really, really important. So back at the time, they taught me about things like drinking wine, obviously, rather than cider. I was that bit of white lightning when I was 15. And also things like, going for nice food. And Ralph always says that he taught me how to use my cutlery, but I think possibly my cutlery training came from here as well. So, and I say cutlery, I obviously knew how to use a knife and fork, using, properly with like a rows of things. I remember Pretty Woman when she sits there with all these knives and forks. That was kind of me in my first job, so that was fine. At the time I was engaged, and I think because of this job, the gap between our lifestyles became really, really obvious. And we actually bought a house together. I was 18 years old, and we split up 3 weeks later. And I kept the house. So this is my first foray onto the property ladder. I was really, really fortunate at the time. My parents had paid off their mortgage, and my dad was guarantor. He replaced my ex, so I could remove him off the mortgage. My dad was guarantor of my mortgage. So I was in a very fortunate position for that to happen for me. I moved into the house just for my 19th birthday, and money was really, really tight. So this is kind of like throughout my childhood, although I'd not been particularly affluent, and we'd always had the nice things, I hadn't ever really been aware that money was an issue because my parents never made it an issue. And I think I was very, very lucky from that respect as a child. But suddenly I'm now living in a house. I'm earning £140 a week. My mortgage is £280 a week. I do a 40-mile round trip each day for petrol. I'm running a car, and I've got all the bills to pay, and I'm living on my own. So it kind of was a bit of a shock to the system. So I used to have £25 a month to live on for food. But I guess I just kind of learned. I mean, my mum was very good, and she was very much helped me. I remember her buying me a food parcel when I first moved in with like pasta and rice. And back at home, we never had pasta and rice. My dad was very much a meat and potatoes and 2 veg kind of guy. Mm-hmm. And we didn't really eat pasta and rice. And suddenly this is a whole new diet because I was obviously now on a budget. I learned a respect and love for pasta and for rice, which has put me in good stead later on. I kind of worked out how to keep costs down. I rented out a room to a friend, so that brought in some extra income. And luckily, she had a boyfriend whose mum made homemade wine, and she didn't drink it herself.
Bonus.
Well, this is great. So basically we lived on, well, this is why I always think I have iron guts when it comes to eating food, or did have for a long time, is because I drank so much basically homemade wine as a teenager. This is what basically kept me going. So at 21, I was made redundant from my job, and unfortunately, my relationship with my boss at that company, much as I loved it in my early days, had really deteriorated, and I'd lost a lot of my confidence. And really, so when I started going around for interviews, I couldn't say boo to a goose. I was an absolute blithering wreck. And they'd go, "Oh, you do this?" And I'd be like, "Yeah." And I was just like, honestly, I just wanted to slap myself as I was going around, because I knew what I was doing, but I just couldn't get out of it. So I was made redundant, and I didn't have a job to go to, and I had a mortgage, and I had obviously loads of outgoings. And although I had a friend living with me, obviously she wasn't going to be paying my mortgage. So it was quite a worrying time. Luckily, I got temporary work straight away, because they don't need to interview you. They just put you in somewhere. So that makes it really good. And I found that once I got into places, and my confidence built, and that really, really helped. And again, I had what I would call another quite defining moment in my life. And I think when you go through life, there are things that happen. And I think there's things that put you on a certain path. And the next defining moment, I think really for me, was I was temping, and I was offered 2 temporary positions. One was working at HMRC for 4 weeks as a temp, and the other one was working at Friends Provident for 3 weeks as a temp, but with the possibility of moving it to be a permanent position. Now, I'm really anal, as you know, and so because I'd agreed to do the one at HMRC, I was like, well, I can't do the Friends Provident one. I've already agreed. And a friend of mine at the time basically gave me a bit of a slap and said, for goodness sake, the other one's going to be a full-time job. Take it, ring up and cancel the HMRC job, which is what I did. And again, kind of the rest is history. About 6 weeks working into Friends Provident, I realised that financial services was something that I was really, really passionate about. My parents were like, we have no idea what you're talking about. I'd learned so much in a short period of time. I had basically blown their minds on the knowledge that I had. I got a pension, which I hadn't had a pension before. I started studying for my financial services exams. I invested into a stocks and shares ISA, which again, before then I would never have dreamed of doing. I upgraded from dry pasta to fresh pasta. You see, pasta's a very important part of my life. And I moved nearer Norwich, and I moved nearer my office, and things were really, really good. I really enjoyed the work I did. I enjoyed the people I worked with, and I've just really loved what I was doing. Outside work, I love holidays, as you know, and I discovered National Trust Working Holidays a couple of years before then, and I'd worked out that if I led a working holiday, I didn't have to pay to go, and they paid me petrol money, and I got to choose what food to eat. More fresh pasta. So that was really, really good. As I started at Friends Provident, I could then afford more. So not only could I afford fresh pasta, I could upgrade my holidays. And I was then my first big holiday was planting trees on Mount Fuji in Japan, which was like an amazing experience, but something I probably wouldn't have been able to do, and probably wouldn't have dreamed of doing if I'd have not done the journey that I'd done and followed in the footsteps and met the people that I'd met. Unfortunately, all good things come to an end, as we know. And obviously, ups and downs as with every life. And I got made redundant from Friends Provident when they shut the Norwich branch, because back then you couldn't work from home.
Very different.
Absolutely, a completely different world. And I went to work for a different IFA firm in Norwich, so an independent financial advisors firm in Norwich. But I really didn't feel like I fitted in. I really felt quite out of place. I just didn't feel right for me. Now, that summer I went to St Kilda. So St Kilda's a remote island off the Outer Hebrides, which I'm really, really passionate about, which I won't talk too much about. But again, every time I've ever been, it has been a real defining moment in my life and changes that I've made. And this was a time when I realised I wanted to set up my own business and basically go and start my own company. And that was really, really important to me. So I came back. I basically left the job I was in, and I set up a business with a guy that I'd worked with when I was at Friends Provident. Now, unfortunately, this didn't work out quite as planned. There was various factors that didn't quite work out. And I probably spent a year not earning what I should have been earning, and 3 months at the end of that period where I didn't get paid at all. And I was living off my credit card for that kind of 12 months. Again, I was being frugal, but you can only be frugal there is a kind of limit. So with a mortgage and things like that. So I was putting all my food on the credit card. I was trying to get as much as things as I could. And I built up about 10, 15 grand of a credit card debt. So, which was something that I played on my mind. I didn't like having that kind of debt. So certainly as well, I think when you're single as well, when you've got debt, there is only you. I think sometimes when you're in a partnership, you can share that load. Whereas when you're on your own, it sits on you a lot heavier, I think. In the end, I ended up leaving that job. We made a decision to part ways, and the other person continued the company, which still runs today. And I left and ended up working in a manufacturing company nearer home. At which point I lived really, really frugally. We went back on the old dry pasta because obviously that's kind of a real defining moment of wealth for me. And basically, eventually I go to restaurants and I buy pasta that someone else cooks for me. But at this point, back to the dry pasta. And because the job was quite near home, I cycled to work, so I didn't need my car. So I really, really cut down on my outgoings and cleared my debt off. And then came across an opportunity that was coming up with some of the guys I'd worked with before at Friends Providence, setting up a new business. And I knew it was coming, so I decided to go traveling. I'd always wanted to go traveling. I'd had time in Japan. I'd been St Kilda. So I went off and I traveled around Asia, and I had like an amazing time. And when I got back, we then set up the company, which is Face-to-Face Finance, which is where I work today, with the man who would eventually become my husband. So with every small business, anyone who's ever set up a company will know that it's not easy sailing. Sometimes, there's rocks in the road. And, in the first few years, you don't make much money. You're working all the hours there is, you're putting everything in, and you're just trying to get out enough to pay the bits that come through. So it was difficult. We were still living in my 2-bedroom house. Ralph put all my clothes in the loft. He put a loft hatch in and everything because his clothes were priority. And 2008 came, and obviously that was when the world kind of ended from a financial services point of view. And we were working till 3 a.m. in the morning. It was exhausting. It was just a really bad time, work-wise, definitely. No meetings, seeing clients weren't good. I mean, Ralph was coming home really, really stressed every night because there was nothing good to tell people. We didn't know when it was going to end. We didn't know what the end was going to be. And it was a really, really bad time because we were in the middle of a financial meltdown. Remember back to the run on Northern Rock. Those were the kind of things that are in the news at the time. The government was bailing out banks. It wasn't great. So we obviously, of course, to coincide with 2000, we decided to buy a house at the top of the market as the market crashed as well. So always a good timing for that as well. That was not good. So at this time, I didn't take a wage from the company because it just wasn't, with the market dropping, everything else, money was tight. And I remember that it had a really negative impact on me at the time. And and it wasn't even the amount. I just felt I needed some kind of recognition for what I was doing. So even if it was just like £500 a month, it just was that something to acknowledge, some sort of acknowledgement for what I was doing. And I really struggled with that. I hadn't thought I would. And when I agreed to take the car, I was like, and Ralph was getting paid. So it wasn't like, it wasn't money coming into the house. But I really struggled with that not earning. It really made me really, really low. We kind of rectified that, and that improved the situation. And then things obviously started to improve. And now we're obviously how many years later, 13 years later from 2008. And to be fair, things are really good. In 2012, we set up another company, the estate planning company, which has gone from strength to strength. And now, I live in a beautiful house. I have a lovely spacious office. I like to say far too many staff, but lots of lovely people in my team who I work with. The business is growing. It's going really, really well. I have a fantastic succession plan in place of great people that I feel confident about leaving the company in their sort of capable hands. And I get to enjoy between 3 to 4 months holiday a year, COVID aside, when I'm actually allowed to leave the country, which basically I didn't have many holidays last year, but I plan to in the future. But yeah, I think that's kind of like where my life is at the moment. So,
wow. So what does the future hold? Obviously, you've got a succession plan in place, but what does the future hold for you as well in your journey?
I think last year was quite a sad year for me because obviously apart from COVID, and obviously I know lots of people had really bad experiences. So, but my mum was taken quite ill quite suddenly and unexpectedly, unfortunately, died. And I think it really put kind of and she was only 64 at the time. And I think it really made me think about what my life would look like going forward. And Ralph is obviously a few years older than me, so he's a bit nearer 64 than I am. But it really made me think about things. And that's when we kind of started putting together a plan of what our future would hold. So I'm hoping that we've got a plan in place for retirement and to start sort of moving forward from that as well. And also to make sure that in those years up until that we actually really enjoy life as well. And that's really, really important. I would say I'm not a big label girl, so buying expensive handbags and things, that doesn't really do it for me, but travel does it for me, and experiences. And I think that, I'm hoping that our next few years together will be full of amazing travel and amazing experiences. And that's what's important to me in my life.
Making memories.
Absolutely. Yeah, I guess that's correct. Making memories. And a few photo books too, because obviously being that anal person, there will be a photo book involved.
From every holiday.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for sharing your journey with us today, Julie. Before we go, you need to tell us what your favourite holiday destination is. Now, I know you've been on quite a few, so it might be difficult to choose, but...
This is it. It's really difficult, isn't it? So I have had some amazing experiences, like, from Chernobyl and Antarctica. And I think my best holiday ever would be Antarctica. Mm-hmm. But the place that I'd be most likely to go back to would be Las Vegas.
Las Vegas. Why Las Vegas?
Because I think Vegas has a bit of everything. And I get that people sometimes say, I've been to Vegas for 3 days. It was awful. I wouldn't go again. But I think the experience that they've had is a different experience to what I have when I go. So we normally go for 2 weeks at a time. And I just think there's so much to offer. It's basically in the middle of an area of natural beauty. You have so many national parks surrounding it, which are very much within a few hours drive from there, even less in some cases. Great food. So it's a place where you can go hiking in the day, go back and basically get in a ball gown in the evening to go to a show and have an amazing meal. I think it offers a bit of everything to everybody. And the history is really interesting. There's some really fantastic museums and things. And we could make this into a Vegas podcast, which I think maybe we should do a Vegas, like on a shoestring podcast, It'd be quite cool.
I'm sure we could do that one.
I think that'd be a good choice. But but there's something about Vegas, and until you've been, it's very, very, very hard to describe what it's like and how big those casinos are.
I can imagine. I can only imagine because I've never been.
We'll get you there one day, don't you worry.
Definitely. Well, thank you, Julie, for sharing that with us today. I'm sure everybody will enjoy listening to it.
Thank you very much.
And with that, we've completed today's episode. We hope you have enjoyed following along with us today and taking another step closer to a financially secure future.
If you've enjoyed today's podcast, you can head over to themoneycompass.co.uk, where you can find out more information, hints and tips from today's episode.
If you'd like to get more involved, share your own experiences and learn from a friendly community on a similar journey to you, why not join us in our Facebook group, The Money Compass, where we will support you in navigating your way to financial success.
Thank you for listening and see you next time.